Hi, it's Jody Cohen, and I'm super excited to have Dr. Daniel Pompa joining us today. He is a global health leader and an innovator on a mission to educate practitioners and the public on the origins of inflammation-driven diseases, cellular detoxification, fasting strategies, and diet variation principles. Although he was trained as a chiropractor, his authority comes from victory within his own battle, having overcome neurotoxic illness that was rooted in heavy metal toxicity. Dr. Pompa is the host of Cellular Healing TV and the author of some great books, Beyond Fasting, which I highly recommend, and the Cellular Healing Detox Diet, Cellular Healing Diet. Thank you so much. Welcome, Dr. Pompa.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I love doing shows like this.
Well, I'm really excited that I want to ask you, why is our parasympathetic nervous system key to healing?
Yeah. Well, we have this fight or flight system, and then we also need that system, for the calm to digest, right? And when you look at the gut being the second brain, it's responsible for how this brain works. These two brains are connected. Obviously, all the nutrients that we need to live, heal, function is driven by the parasympathetic. So if the gut is so responsible for healing and how we feel, because it's connected to all these neurotransmitters, and we know now, right, that 70% of the immune system starts in the gut, especially today. The bottom line is the parasympathetic controls that area of digestion, and therefore has an impact into how your brain works, how you feel, your immune system. That's the power of the parasympathetic. And when people are stuck in this survival mode of sympathetic, it destroys their immune system and how this brain works. They're opposites.
Well, and also, if you think about digestion and detoxification and the role of the liver, the vagus nerve innervates the liver. And if you're in a fight or flight state, the liver isn't getting the blood flow that really helps. One of the things that I really admire that you do is that you're really helping people switch from being a sugar burner to a fat burner, which is a lot more sustainable. I'm wondering if you can talk about that and kind of talk about, why it might be hard for people to get into that fat burning state.
Yeah, look, the cells use two things for energy, sugar or fat. Very healthy people can go back and forth. If you eat a lot of carbohydrates, sugar, it'll burn it up, because if it stays around in the system and not burned up, well, it's very oxidative. It causes inflammation. It ages you very quickly. It creates all kinds of damage. And that's why if you think of a diabetic that has elevated glucose and insulin, right, they age prematurely. They don't die from diabetes. They die from a complicating factor, whether it's stroke, heart disease, etc. So that's how damaging it is. So the point I'm making is the cells, if you eat sugar, it should burn it up because it doesn't want that process to happen. But when you're not eating, what does your cells use? It should be using fat as energy. And I'm not even talking about the fat you eat necessarily, although that's part of it. But when you're not eating at all, your body should be able to tap into its stored fat and utilize that for energy. It's a very clever system. So when you're not eating, you're burning your fat. And you can get yourself to this efficiency of glucose, fat burning, sugar burning, fat burning, sugar burning. Hey, I'm not going to eat today. And I do it often, and I get busy, and I don't even get hungry. Why? Because my cells shifted over, because they're healthy, to fat burning. We call that efficient fat adaptation.
Right. And the other thing that I think is so genius level about what you're doing is that the toxins get stored in the fat. And so if we're not burning the fat, it's really hard to detoxify. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, the toxins do get stored in fat cells. They get stored in a lot of cells because they go into these fatty membranes that are all of our cells. So once your cells become toxic, okay, now you're in trouble, because guess what? I always like to draw pictures, and I probably need a better pen to do this because it'll run out, but that's all right. We'll draw a picture anyway. Okay,
Thank you.
So here's your cell, okay? So on every cell are these receptors to hormones, okay? So when this cell starts to get toxic, right, what happens is inflammation occurs in the cell. And if I draw these little circles like this, these are mitochondria. That's where you make energy, okay? So this also has a membrane that can inflame. So what happens is that when this cell becomes toxic, these membranes in and around the cell inflame. Well, why is that even relevant to those watching this because this is really important. This determines how you feel. And that's all people watching this care about. That's why. And this is how you burn fat, right?
Yes.
So once these membranes become inflamed, you don't hear hormones like thyroid hormone, leptin, insulin. Okay. All of these hormones are fat burning hormones. They help you burn fat for energy.
Right.
So therefore, when you're not eating, if your cells can hear these hormones, these little mitochondria in here burn fat, right? So this is where these little energy houses that make energy for you to think, feel good, digest food normally. When you're healthy, they can burn sugar or fat. But when these cells get inflamed,
right,
then you don't. Okay, what's the number one cause of cellular inflammation that stops this fat burning process? Toxins.
Right, especially heavy metals.
Yeah, exactly. So they come into these cells, to your point, right? You know, fat cells, of course, hold them, but all cells hold them. These membranes inflame, the cell gets inflamed. Now it can't burn fat because it can't hear your hormones that tell it to burn fat.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. So therefore, we have to get the toxins away from the cell.
Right.
That's one of the ways that we shift people to become more efficient fat burners. So, and by the way, skinny people watching, okay, this can happen to you too. Because what you do is you end up storing visceral fats, right, which is arguably more dangerous. So you become
meaning inside the body where you can't see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you become skinny fat. And when I was sick, that was me. I was like losing muscle, and I still had this horrible belly fat that when I was in clothes, no one noticed, but I knew I was getting skinny fat. So the bottom line is the reason people can't lose weight today, the reason why they get weight loss resistance, the reason they don't sleep well, have anxiety, all of these are cellular issues. Right?
Yes, and looping it back to the vagus nerve releases the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which helps the body anti-inflame. But you have a program, True Cellular Detox, that I'm doing. And what I love about it is it's this weird vicious cycle that it's almost like a flypaper. It's really hard to get out of it once you start. And I love that you've kind of really looked at it and figured out how do we anti-inflame the cells? And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit in your protocol.
Well, look, you know, real detox. I want to pick up, you said one little thing, and it's important to the subject that you're discussing, sympathetic, parasympathetic. When these toxins get into cells that are in your brain and your nerves are surrounded by this myelin sheath. It's like a wire around the coating, the plastic coating around a wire. It protects the nerves, right? Well, in humans, that's made of fat and it protects your nerves. It's called myelin. Toxins go for that. Okay.
Yes.
When you get that up in your brain and on these nerves, you're stuck in this sympathetic dominant state.
Right. And that cell danger response where your cells are always saying, you know, if you think about when you get sick, what do? You're tired, you're in pain, so you don't move. It basically immobilizes you so that you can heal. But if you're stuck that way forever, it's fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome.
And then you have anxiety. You
Yes.
wake up in the middle of the night, you can't get back to sleep. This was me when I was sick, you know, all the way back in 1999 to 2005. I was very sick. But the bottom line is I was stuck in the sympathetic mode. Didn't digest, allergic to everything I was eating. I was trying to run from this food, that food, then I'd eat these foods, I'd become allergic to those foods, intolerant, blah, 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 right? And then waking up in the middle of the night, anxiety, these sympathetic dominance, right? It's like, well, ultimately, I discovered I had massive amounts of mercury in my hypothalamus pituitary, which controls your thyroid, controls your adrenals.
It controls the whole endocrine system.
Absolutely. Ties into your vagus nerve, which is parasympathetic. So the bottom line is I was stuck there. And it really, at the upstream was toxic. You know, I was very, very toxic, driving this sympathetic dominance. Okay, back to your question. So many people understand that toxins drive this sympathetic dominant state, why they can't sleep, why they have brain fog, can't digest food. Okay, but they're downstream trying to do colon cleanses, liver cleanses, 10-day cleanse, this cleanse, that cleanse. Ultimately, real detox has to occur here at the cell. That's it. So when these cells make energy in these little factories we call mitochondria, guess what it makes when it makes energy? Just like you burn wood in a fireplace, it makes smoke. It makes waste that your cell has to get rid of.
Right.
So
That's what people don't realize. Cellular debris can be a natural metabolic process. You're
yes,
constantly creating garbage that the
that's
body
right.
needs to clean up.
So if we don't get the cell doing what it has to do day in, day out and open up the damper, so to speak, so when you burn the wood and make the energy, you don't make, you're not, again, if you don't open up the damper, the smoke pours in the house. You die of smoke, not flames.
Oh, I lived in New York City when the garbage collectors went on strike. That was memorable.
Imagine living there now with all this viral stuff. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
know.
the bottom line is we have to get the cell detoxing. Real detox has to occur at the cell. When we
Yes.
can get this upregulated in removing toxins,
Right.
there lies the magic. That's the key. You
Right.
have to
And
fix the cell and get
what I love about your program is there's a sequencing element to it.
there is.
Like, I think one of the things you mentioned, all of these liver cleanses, it's almost like, you need to crawl before you walk before you run. Like, no one would expect a toddler, or a newborn to just start running. There are stages and there are reasons. Can you kind of talk about how you sequence your true
Yeah.
cellular detox
Yeah,
protocol?
so there's a prep phase where we get the cells prepped for detox.
Right.
And then you get the downstream pathways ready, the liver, the kidneys, the gut, the lymph.
Right.
You want to open those up before we start the process. So step one, prepare for where we're going. Step two is what I call body phase. We want to get the easy to get toxins in and around the cells, the interstitial fluids, whatever. Think of it just clearing the body. Why? Because the next phase is called a brain phase. So you just realize all those symptoms I was talking about, the inability to burn fat, the nerve tissue, the brain. That's why you still don't feel well. So the brain phase, we want to clear the body first.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go after it deeply. Why? And I don't want to bore people with science, but toxins move from higher concentration to lower. So if we clear the body, then we can go to where the real problem is, and that's in the deeper tissue. So we move them from higher concentration to lower.
I absolutely love that. And can you kind of speak to how, when you help detox and get the toxins out, that actually impacts the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic state?
Yeah. So again, I use my own story, right? My nerve tissue, my brain, all of that is sympathetic, parasympathetic, right? So once you relieve that control center that drives the parasympathetic, sympathetic, now you can bring the body back down to this innate balance of knowing when to be sympathetic. We need sympathetic. We have to have that fight or flight, that energy that'll save your life. You have to be able to do that. But when you're stuck there, you die soon and you don't feel good. But
Right.
we have to have that ability. The brain controls that. So
Right.
ultimately, we have to clear the brain to
Right.
basically be able to bring back that homeostasis. That means balance. And when you have balance, you're in parasympathetic most of the time, sympathetic when you need it. The brain controls that balance. That's a simple way. I mean, there's a lot.
No, that's perfect. And if you can talk a little bit about how being a sugar burner versus a fat burner, being able to be in ketosis, and how that helps contribute to parasympathetic tone and being able to get into that state more.
Yeah, so when the cell's stuck as a sugar burner, which so many people are, and again, it's the hormonal inability to shift over and burn fat when you're not eating, right? So when people say, well, I can't lose weight, I eat a perfect diet, that's a hormone problem. But it's a hormone problem because it's a cellular problem. The receptors to hormones are on the cell, right? So, that's, think about that connection. But when your cells can't use fat as energy and it's only burning sugar, it's making more toxins than needs to be, right?
Oh.
So again, the toxic—
Fat's more clean burning than sugar.
Absolutely. So think of it this way. I used wood as an example. When you burn wood, you need a damper. You need a chimney. You need a fireplace with an open damper, because when you burn wood, it makes a lot of smoke. Think of that as sugar. Now, think about if you turn on your stove, you have gas, right? That blue flame that comes up. Okay, that's energy and it's fire, and arguably even more hot than what's in your fireplace, but you don't need a damper. Matter of fact, you don't see any smoke. Think of that as fat.
That's an amazing analogy.
It burns clean. It burns much cleaner. So when your body can shift over to utilizing fat, we can downregulate a lot of this endogenous, meaning in the cell toxins. And now we even have a chance to start detoxing. So, remember, a toxic state is a sympathetic state. right? It's a state that you don't want to be in. It's toxic people are constantly, the body's trying to save its life, and that's not where you want to be.
Right, right. That's really great. And if you can talk a little bit more about, your strategy in fixing the gut versus the brain, like what you found. I mean, I'm actually very curious because you went from, this was your personal journey and you basically saved yourself and then kind of carried water from the burning flames back to help the rest of us who are still on fire. How did you kind of, what has worked really well for you, and what did you kind of start with, and how did you figure out this whole paradigm?
Well, when I realized, it took me some years to figure out even what was going on, to be honest. And, I addressed my thyroid, my adrenals, like so many, because I
Yes.
wasn't adapted to stress. I couldn't even handle loud noise. I couldn't sleep. I mean, skinny, fat, hair was falling out. I mean, so I knew that
Oh,
that was an issue. But when I would
right.
address my thyroid or my adrenals, I mean, some things might get better, but ultimately I wasn't getting better. So then I realized in the center of your brain is the pituitary hypothalamus. That's kind of your control tower of all your hormones, right? And I realized something was wrong there. I just didn't know what. And then one day I'm online and I found Mad Hatter's disease. And people remember what that is, but people making felt hats were using mercury as a part of the
Right.
process. They became mercury toxic. I was like, I'm a Mad Hatter. So I went and got a blood test and it was normal. Unfortunately, it
Oh,
was the wrong test. So fast forward a year or so later, I became friends with a very bright endocrinologist. He said, Dan, I think you have mercury toxicity. And I was like, I thought so too, but I did a blood test. It was normal. He's like, nah, wrong test. If you were a Mad Hatter using mercury every day, it would be
hmm.
in your blood. But I think you were chronically poisoned from years ago. So do a challenge test where you challenge out of your tissue and then, see what's there. And sure enough, mercury, lead, and other metals showed up. So then I was like, well, where do you think I got that from? He said, do you have any dental work done around when this happened?
Hmm.
And I looked back and I had a journal because I was cycling. And sure enough, 3 days after this dental appointment is kind of when the fatigue started. And then it escalated from there. Then it was fatigue,
Right,
anxiety.
because the mercury in your mouth got mobilized.
I had 2 silver fillings that contained 50% mercury removed at that time. Now, I still had 6 others in my mouth. They do contain 50% mercury, but when they took those out, it vaporized a lot at once. And looking back now at studies, and that those fillings vaporize mercury that crosses the blood-brain barrier. It builds up in your brain slowly, particularly the hypothalamus pituitary. So therein lied my answer. So when I went online to figure out how to get it out, I realized there's all this crap about metal detox. Does chlorella work, cilantro?
Yes.
I'm one of those people. I just don't take what I read for granted. I dig deeper than that. And I
That's
found that there was
that's why I
no,
love what you've come up with, because it's better than what's out there.
I was dyslexic as a child. I couldn't read till 7th grade. So part
Oh,
of my
wow.
gift is being able to read things, determine and remember
Oh,
them,
you're
right?
discerning, yeah.
So believe me, the battles we have in our life, there's ultimate gifts there all the time. So that was
I
one of them.
I agree with that. It would be interesting to be able to look at your life backwards and see all those things that felt horrible at the time, and you realized what a gift
Pain
they
to
were.
purpose has been my mantra now. I wouldn't even be sitting here today if I didn't get very, very sick. And believe me, I have a lot of other stories of pain to purpose in my life. So that is why it's my whole family's mantra. And there's a whole story there. But the bottom line is that, researching really how to get this stuff out of my body and particularly out of my brain, that's really what I teach today, because there's so much garbage information out there. You have to fix the cell to get well. And more specifically, you have to detox the cell to get well.
Yes, and that's why that's actually pain to purpose is very much my call to action too, because I think I
Mm-hmm.
see so many people that think they're doing everything right, that are over exercising, that are eating what they think they're supposed to, and they're doing it in such a hyper stressed state that it's almost like whatever they're putting in it, the nutrients aren't getting assimilated and the toxins aren't leaving because they're so stressed. And it
Uh,
doesn't occur to them
and,
that they just need to switch gears.
and remember this, and this is really good for your viewers to understand. The body doesn't know the difference of physical stress, chemical stress, or emotional stress. Okay. Meaning if you exercise too much and you don't adapt to that stress, it becomes a negative.
Yes.
Emotional stress, we all have it. But when your body adapts, you're good. When it doesn't, now you're put into a state of cellular inflammation. Chemicals, the problem with chemicals is we have them in our tissue, in and around our cells. That is a constant stress. So any of these stressors, physical, chemical, or emotional, keep you in that sympathetic state.
Yes,
Remember
it's like
that.
having too many tabs open and your device doesn't work.
Absolutely.
It drains your battery.
That's right, exactly. Drains your battery, your cellular batteries. So everyone gets the fact that if you're emotionally stressed, you're sympathetic. And if you stay emotionally stressed, you stay sympathetic. And we talk about trapped emotions. Your cells literally can hold on to emotions like it can toxins. So imagine that. So if you've had a lot of abuse in your life and different things, your subconscious holds on to that. It sends signals to your cells. You're stuck in a sympathetic state. So when I work with someone, coaching them, and I just do this virtually now, my people are from all around the world. I evaluate their physical trapped emotions, right? Or the trapped emotions. I evaluate their physical stresses and I evaluate their chemical stresses, because ultimately we have to unload all of the stresses.
Yes.
And then we can bring you out of that sympathetic state back into a normal balance.
And one of the things that we haven't talked about, you have a great binder. Like I find that sometimes if people go to therapy or do something where they're really releasing a lot of those emotions, it actually causes a physical detoxification. And can you speak a little bit about binders and why they're so critical?
Well, that's really important. I come back to my board.
Yeah.
All right, so real detox has to be at the cell, right? So as we start unloading any toxin from this cell, remember, it could be trapped emotions too, right? Well, these toxins have to be escorted out of the body. Otherwise, they move, they redistribute, they get into other cells, cross the blood-brain barrier. Not
right.
good.
Right.
Okay.
They can actually get out of the fat cell where they were kind of sequestered into the brain where they cause damage.
That's right. Exactly. So there's a binder called Detox. I don't know.
That I happen to have handy.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Now they can see it better. But that's a vehicle that once we start getting the cell detoxing, Detox actually has very small particles that can actually enter into the cell. So think about these little particles in here.
Right.
And there's bigger particles that stay out here. Well, why? Because the little ones start creating a concentration gradient and move toxins out of the cell. But we want these big ones to prevent redistribution. So when the cell itself starts moving toxins out, we have to have these guys out here to catch them.
Right.
Otherwise, you redistribute. That's the importance of binders, right? And then cyto is meant to exit the body. Now, we don't stop there. If I can draw a liver, that is a very poor liver, but it's a liver. All right. Many of the toxins make their way to that liver.
Correct.
Okay? All right. Now, the liver holds on, it holds on to toxins oftentimes in something called bile, B-I-L-E. That's what you use to digest fat in your gut. Now, follow me. I'm going to draw a really bad intestines here. So there's your gut, okay? That little snake down there. So what happens is when you digest fat, your liver will dump the bile to digest fat in the gut. But guess what it brings with it? Toxins.
The toxins, yeah.
Yeah, they hold it. Bile holds toxins. There's a name for it called hepatic, that means liver. Biliary, that means bile. Sludge, that's obvious. That's
yes.
So hepatic biliary sludge ends up dumping into your gut. Here's what I want everyone to understand, is that your body's designed to reabsorb bile from the lower intestine back to the liver. Why does it do that? So it doesn't have
it's valuable.
Yeah, it is. It's valuable. It doesn't want to, it can recreate it, but it doesn't want to. It takes a lot of energy. But what does it bring with it if the toxins are bound up in the bile? Toxins. So we call this auto-intoxication. You just go round and round and round, and you're doing all these wonderful things, but it's stuck in this round and round and round. So we have
another vicious cycle. So you need to make sure that the toxins leave the body.
That's right. I don't know if you have bind in your reach, but bind, B-I-N-D, that's a binder with 4 different types of binders in it, and it just stays in that gut. So while we're moving toxins from the cell, pushing them out of the liver, we have a catcher's mitt that stays in the gut. Why? So you don't auto-intoxicate.
Well,
so
and that was important what you said, that it has 4 different things, because different, there's charcoal, there's psyllium, there's chlorella. they capture different metals and different toxins. So the combination, it's a little bit like a catch-all, you know, like the all-around player that can play any position.
And many people try to detox with those things, right? You mentioned, but they don't go to the cell. They don't upregulate cell function. So it's a very special carbon that's in that product. Very expensive and hard to work with because it has such a strong binding capacity. And it has literally this, I mean, if you take it out of the pill and put it in the air, it'll go and stick to things.
Yeah.
But, you know, but as good as it is, it doesn't do anything for your cells. And remember, real detox has to go to the cell, but it stays in the gut and it prevents that auto intoxication. So 20 years I've taught this system about regulating the cell, using real binders, and making sure it goes out of the body. So, and my 5 R's is how we upregulate that cell function, and I kind of have a patent on that process and teaching it for years.
Well, this was unbelievable. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about the vagus nerve, the parasympathetic state, or detoxification that we haven't touched on?
You know, I mean, one of the other things, and this is maybe another show, but yeah, when I teach doctors, I teach a multi-therapeutic approach, how to do cellular detox, and then fasting, and that's why I wrote the book Beyond Fasting there. Fasting is a way that we utilize and help people get into a parasympathetic. It helps the detox process. It allows the body to go through a natural healing process. The Nobel Prize in 2016 was won by a Japanese gentleman for one process called autophagy that happens during a fast. What does that mean? In a fasting state, the body eats the bad stuff, the bad debris, the bad cells, and it cleans itself. So when you put these two concepts together, and that's how the magic happens.
That's amazing. Well, I'm a big fan of you and everything you're doing. How can people learn more about you or connect with other questions?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to my website. It's simple. It's DR, like doctor, DR, then my last name, Pompa. So drpompa and .com. And if you go to beyondfastingbook.com, you can get the book.
It's a great book. It does a really great job of explaining things, and I think it's the best book I've read on intermittent fasting.
I appreciate that. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.